Welcome to the Civic Brief with Dr. Isaiah Ike Wilson III, where complex issues meet everyday lives. Now, let's begin.
So, travelers, you just heard Dr. Bose walk us through the Constitution and how it bends under pressure. What I'd like to do now is us together, we're going to put a simple lens on that pressure that Dr. Bose talked about. We'll call that the wise way. Here's the compound reality. Today's shocks, they stack. Storms, cyber hits, market jolts, rumor storms. In that turbulence, presidents feel pushed to speed up government. The risk isn't only overreach, it's drift. Emergencies quietly becoming everyday habit. The wise way is a discipline for moving fast, but also staying legitimate. Let's talk about this in terms of what I'll call 4 plain moves. Here's move 1. We got to look at this through process as being policy. Now, if a decision really matters, it earns a 1-page options note to the president. In plain English, here's what that options note might lay out. What are we really trying to achieve? Secondly, how would we do it? With what resources? What could go wrong? And how do we reverse it? Importantly also, who's watching the store? If we can't write all that down and be transparent about it, we probably shouldn't do it. Then keep a small cross team composed of law, facts, operations, money, messaging, so speed doesn't amputate any limb. And then we need to agree before the storm, again, I'll say that, before the storm, what triggers a heads up to Congress, that first branch check and balance, what needs consultation, and what needs consent. In other words, no rulemaking on the fly. Let's look at move 2. Broaden the toolkit. This is where we talk about in the wise way that integrated what I call 3D times C, diplomacy, defense, development multiplied by commerce. Defense. It needs to be the last amplifier, not the first reflex. Diplomacy. It buys access and permission. Things like overflight, basing, intel sharing, even ensures in port authorities when the issue deals in the maritime realm. Development. This is resilience, both in a global sense and a domestic sense, to include things like ports, power, hospitals, data hubs that keep life upright. Commerce, from the household to the global geoeconomic realm. Targeted export controls, temporary insurance or credit backstops, mineral and supply deals that help communities, not just spreadsheets. What's the point? When your toolbox is wider, you don't need force or executive fiat to move fast. Move 3. Let's look at Maxi-Min guardrails. What do I mean by that? Maximize our position, minimize single point failure. I would say 3 simple checkpoints here. First, regular touch points, again, with that first branch, Congress, the people's branch. Second, emergency powers that expire. Let me say that again, that expire on a clock unless renewed in transparent daylight. Thirdly, a public scorecard that separates the truly extraordinary from what's merely convenient. Let's also think about bounding the box up front, setting the goal, the limits, and the off-ramps, and who owns the risk if all of our assumptions fail. Finally, move 4, civic transparency, the legitimacy engine, folks. Speak to the country in plain English about what we know, also about what we don't know, and what could change our approach. Name the trade-offs, invite referees, inspector generals, courts, committees, so people can tell emergency from opportunism. Folks, that's the wise way. Fast when we must be, bounded by design. Now, I want to offer a couple of quick human scale scenarios. First, let's imagine a scenario, let's call it a 72-hour megastorm. The place, Gulf Coast landfall. Power's out across 3 states. Refineries flooded. Hospitals wobbling. Social feeds, they're on fire. Let's go back to that step one, that move one. Let's say between the hour of 0 to 6 hours into the crisis. Process first. Small resilience huddles. Let's look at 2 one-page options that we send to the president, each with costs laid out, legal lanes, oversight, and a 72-hour sunset. Again, that limiter. Option 1 might be something like a disaster declaration plus targeted production surge to include generators, oxygen, plus a short fuel spec waiver to move gas faster. All these emergency actions. Let's lay out an option 2 for the POTUS. Disaster declaration plus max mutual aid and lift capacity. Keep extraordinary powers all in reserve. Move 2 or step 2, something within the hours of the first 6 to 24. Use the wide toolbox, that Broaden toolbox that we talked about. Let's look at defense first. In fact, in terms of use last. Lift critical supplies, guard does rescues in debris, restores comms, limited but effective. Diplomacy, at home and next door. Moving utility crews across borders, aligning port reopening rules, tapping neighbors for temporary power flows. Let's look through the lens of development. Temporary power to hospitals and water plants, opening of shelters, deployment of medical teams and basic medicines. And then that commerce lens. Turn on small business disaster loans, enable limited trucking waivers for fuel and food, standing up a price gouging task force. Move 3, guardrails plus that transparent sunlight that we talked about. Got to tell Congress what was invoked and when it expires. Importantly, let me say again, and when it expires. Tell the public daily, percent power restored, hospitals open, shelters, fuel days of supply, 911 response times. Name the triggers to stand down waivers and guard support. By day 7, we want to publish a short after action, including what ends, what continues under normal law, what, if anything, moves to a formal rulemaking, no temporary powers that quietly become permanent. Why this would work. It would give us speed, but speed with receipts. Broader tools than force or executive fiat. It'll give us clocks, not just vibes, and honest reporting. A simple war powers at home vignette is what I want to put on the table with us now. Now imagine this, fellow travelers. A new post from the president promises to, quote, bring the war to Chicago. Right? Sound familiar? There's talk of federalizing more guard units. Mass agents run dragnets that catch the undocumented. Oh, well, and sometimes the documented as well, right? A lethal maritime stop, say off the coast of Venezuela, gets no public legal lane, no notice to Congress. Not tough to imagine here. Now, here's how the wise way keeps us fast, but also constitutional. Let's walk through the steps. Process is policy. Move 1. Insist on that one pager before any surge. Laying out the objective, legal basis, which would include statute plus case law, geography and time limits, reversibility, and the oversight path. Folks, if it can't be written, it shouldn't be done. Second, use civil tools first. Priority on policing. Better yet, community policing, courts, and community protection. Civil warrants, targeted actions, and due process. Let me say that last part again. And due process. Before any troops. Defense supports civil authorities. It doesn't replace them. Move 3. Back to those guardrails on any exceptional step. Narrow the scope, i.e. which neighborhoods, which hours. Set those short sunsets. For example, 72 hours. Set and ensure mandatory reporting and a standing review with Congress and local leaders. Finally, publish the off-ramp conditions up front. And finally, that fourth move, civic transparency. What we mean here, again, plain English briefings covering the why, the where, how long, and what would end the action. Independent eyes, IGs, courts, watching in real time. The test isn't, did something happen? The real test needs to be, did we keep liberty while keeping people safe? So then what's the bottom line? It has to always be about smart outcomes, not chest thumping for the win. And in gray zone moments, the wise way is both lens as well as lever. Precise in what we authorize, relentless in what we report, honest about trade-offs, a free people will accept. The Republic doesn't need a timid presidency. It needs a bounded one, fast in crisis, truthful in process, and limited by design. That is how power stays useful and right size, and that's the wise way. So if today's conversation helps sharpen your civic lens, subscribe to Compound Security Unlocked on Substack and join this podcast, The Civic Brief. Also, join our Travelers community and connect with us at Wilson Wise Consulting. Together, we can equip leaders and citizens to handle power wisely.
Thanks for tuning into the Civic Brief. Got questions, insights, or ideas? Join us at thecivicbrief.com to continue the dialogue. Subscribe, share, and be part of shaping the future, one brief at a time.